The scent of gun oil and carbon hung in the still air of the Naval Special Warfare Base in Virginia Beach. It was a Friday afternoon, and the armory was a sanctuary of organized chaos, filled with the metallic clatter of bolts being worked and the low hum of professional conversation. For Chief Petty Officer Thomas Granger, a 20-year veteran of the SEAL teams with more combat deployments than he cared to count, it was the most honest part of his week. This was where the romance of the job fell away, leaving only the cold, hard reality of the tools of the trade. He was putting his personal rifle through its paces, a beautiful M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, its composite stock worn smooth by his own hands over thousands of hours of fieldcraft. Across the long, scarred wooden workbench, a young woman he didn't recognize was doing the same. She was in her late 20s with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of focused intensity that Granger immediately recognized as either extreme competence or dangerous nervousness. She wore no uniform, just jeans and a simple t-shirt, which was odd for the armory. Her hands, however, told a different story. They moved over the bolt action of her own M2010 with a fluidity that was mesmerizing. She wasn't just cleaning it. She was communing with it. She ran a cleaning rod through the bore with a patience that spoke of hours of practice, feeling for imperfections that most shooters would miss. She inspected the breech face with a jeweler's loupe, her breathing slow and steady. Granger pretended to be engrossed in his own work, but his eyes, trained to notice the smallest detail, it kept drifting back to her. He watched her disassemble the bolt assembly, her fingers finding the hidden tension points, with an ease that suggested she had done this 1,000 times before. She used a bore snake with a technique that was economical, efficient, and utterly professional. This wasn't a civilian playing soldier. This was a craftsman. He finally broke the silence, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. You handle that like you were born with it in your hands. The woman looked up, her gaze clear and steady. It's a forgiving platform, she replied, her voice soft, but carrying a note of absolute authority. More forgiving than I deserve sometimes. Granger snorted. Forgiving? An M2010? It's a precision instrument. It doesn't forgive. It exposes. He nodded towards her rifle. You shoot matches, local circuits? She shook her head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. No, not matches. Not really. Something in her tone made him press. Spec ops? Contractor? It was the only explanation for a civilian to be this deep in the snake pit. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she finished reassembling her bolt, the action closing with a decisive, oiled thwack. She finally met his gaze, and in her eyes, he didn't see the guardedness of a private contractor or the swagger of a wannabe. He saw something else, a deep, quiet reservoir of memory. It was a look he'd seen in the mirror. Just a civilian, she said, a rancher's daughter from Montana. Granger leaned back in his chair, a flicker of curiosity turning into genuine intrigue. Montana. That explains the comfort with wide spaces. But it doesn't explain the armory on a naval base, or the way you just stripped that bolt blindfolded. He gestured with his chin. Where'd you learn that? 4-H? The woman set her cleaning rod down and looked at him. Her name was Maya, and for the next hour, as the afternoon sun slanted through the high windows of the armory, she began to tell him a story that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the limits of human ability. It was a story about a shot so impossible that it had become a ghost story whispered among the sniper community. A shot at 2,940 meters. It was a number that defied physics, a distance where the bullet's time of flight was measured in seconds, where the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth, would move the target by more than a foot. It was a shot that Granger had heard about through the grapevine, a rumor attributed to a shadowy element of a foreign military, a feat that had been dismissed by many as battlefield myth. As Maya spoke, Granger felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The ghost in the rumor had a name, and she was sitting right in front of him. The air in the armory seemed to grow thicker as Maya set her rifle aside, the metal click of the safety catch echoing in the sudden stillness. She didn't look at Granger as she began to speak, her gaze fixed on a point in the middle distance, as if she were looking through the cinder block walls and across an ocean to a different time and place. "It was about 18 months ago," she started, her voice low and even. "I was part of a private security detail, contracting for an NGO in the Kurdish region. We were there to protect a team of engineers rebuilding a water treatment plant. Low-threat environment, or so they said. But the borders are porous and the shadows are long out there." Granger nodded, familiar with the precarious nature of such permissive environments. She continued, describing how her team had been warned of increased ISIS activity in the surrounding mountain ranges. They'd been harassing villages, setting up observation posts. We weren't there to fight a war, just to keep our people safe. But part of that was understanding the ground. I spent a lot of time on the roof of our compound, glassing the ridges. She paused, her hands resting still on the stock of her rifle. That's when I saw him. A spotter. He was good. Real good. I only caught a flicker of light, maybe off his optics for a split second. But it was enough. I knew we had a problem. Granger leaned forward, his own rifle forgotten. A sniper's worst nightmare is another sniper. "He was hunting you?" "Stalking," Maya corrected. "He was too far out for an effective shot on the compound. He was just watching, logging our patterns, waiting for the right moment." For the next 2 weeks, it was a ghost story. We'd find disturbed earth on a ridgeline, a cigarette butt in a place it had no business being. But we never saw him. My team leader thought I was getting jumpy. The engineers thought I was paranoid. She finally looked at Granger, a flicker of the old frustration in her eyes. They didn't understand. I grew up in the Montana backcountry. I know what it feels like to be prey. And I knew he was still out there. The day it all changed started like any other. A crisp morning with exceptional visibility, the air so dry it felt like it could shatter. The atmospheric conditions were perfect, Maya explained, her language shifting to that of a true ballistics expert. High pressure, stable temperature, almost no wind, the kind of day the ballistics tables are written for. She was on the roof, conducting her morning scan, when she saw the dust plume. A pickup truck with a mounted heavy machine gun was racing towards a small village at the base of the valley. She could hear the distant chatter of the gun, the screams carried on the thin air. They were hitting the village. Women and children. Our clients were safe behind their walls, but I could see it all unfolding. And I was useless. We were too far away to intervene in time. She swung her scope, desperate to find a target, on a way to disrupt the attack. Then she saw him, the spotter. He had broken cover, standing on a different ridge line, nearly 3 kilometers away. He was watching the carnage through his own optics, probably coordinating the strike. He was a kilometer beyond my maximum effective range, beyond any reasonable shooter's range. It wasn't a shot. It was a fantasy. But as she watched, a second figure emerged from the rocks beside the spotter. It was the shooter. He was setting up a position, his long-barreled rifle aimed directly at the village square. They weren't just observing. They were going to join the massacre, picking off survivors from a position of absolute safety. Maya's description became intensely technical, yet suffused with a cold, detached fury. I ran the numbers in my head. 2,940 meters on my M2010 with M118 LR ammunition. The bullet would be in the air for over 6 seconds. The drop was calculated at over 120 feet. I would have to aim what felt like a mile above his head. The wind, even a 1-mile-per-hour breeze I couldn't feel from my position, would push the round off by dozens of feet. The density, altitude, the angle, the spin drift. It was a calculator problem with a dozen variables, and any one of them being wrong meant I'd just be announcing my position. She looked at Granger. Every book, every instructor, every shred of common sense told me it was impossible, that it was suicide to try, that I'd be giving away our position for nothing. Granger sat in stunned silence. He had done the math in his head as she spoke, his own sniper's brain confirming the sheer impossibility of it. He had taken difficult shots over a mile, but they were calculated, controlled events. This was something else. "So what did you do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maya looked down at her hands, the same hands that had so calmly cleaned her rifle just an hour before. "I thought of my father," she said simply. "He taught me to shoot. He taught me that a rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is the decision you make right here." She tapped her temple. "I decided I wasn't going to let them do it. I decided I was going to try." The world narrowed to a single point. Maya's team leader was screaming at her over the radio, demanding to know what she was doing. The engineers were shouting from the courtyard below, but on that rooftop there was only the wind, the target, and the rifle. Maya's recollection of the next few moments was a blur of hyper-focused calculations, as a symphony of science and instinct. She didn't have a spotter with a high-end ballistic computer. She had herself, her data book, and the marksmanship her father had hammered into her on the wind-swept plains of Montana. I knew the base data. I had the atmospheric readings from our Kestrel weather meter. The challenge was the unknown, the mirage, the true wind at the target, the exact air pressure along the bullet's entire flight path. She watched the heat haze shimmering off the rocks near the enemy shooter. It was faint, but it was there. She read it like a language, estimating the wind speed and direction at the target based on its movement. It was a guess, but an educated one. The enemy sniper was settling in behind his rifle, his spotter now prone beside him, glassing the village. They were confident, arrogant in their belief that they were untouchable. "I dialed my scope for 1,000 meters, Maya said. "That was the maximum elevation my scope could handle. For the rest, I had to hold over. I put the crosshairs on a rock formation that I estimated was 120 feet above and slightly to the left of his position. It was an act of faith." She shifted her position, finding a stable natural point of aim, the rifle's bipod digging into the roof's gravel. She took a deep breath, letting half of it out, and held. Her heart rate slowed to a resting rhythm. The sounds of the distant battle, the shouting behind her, all faded into white noise. Her finger took up the slack on the trigger. The SEALs have a saying, "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." Maya's trigger press was imperceptibly slow, on a steady increase of pressure until the sear broke and the rifle roared. The massive .308 caliber round exploded from the barrel, the recoil slamming into her shoulder. But she didn't feel it. She was already working the bolt, her eyes locked on the target through her scope, watching for the impact. The 6-second flight of the bullet stretched into an eternity. The bullet arced towards the heavens, reaching the apex of its trajectory nearly 200 feet above the valley floor. It was a tiny piece of copper and lead, a gamble against the laws of physics. As it began its long, deadly descent, the Coriolis effect was gently tugging it to the right. The wind she had predicted pushed it left. For 6 seconds, the round fought against a dozen forces trying to throw it off course. And then, in the final milliseconds. As the bullet plunged back to Earth, its energy still devastating, it crossed the threshold of the enemy's position. Through her scope, Maya saw it. A small, almost imperceptible puff of dust, exactly where the enemy sniper's chest had been. An instant later, the spotter, who had been looking through his own scope, jerked backward and slumped to the side. The bullet, after passing through the first target, had struck the second. The silence that followed was more profound than the gunshot. The technical in the village, as if sensing the sudden change in the battlefield equation, stopped firing and sped away. The screaming faded. On the distant ridge, the two figures lay still. Maya stared at them through her scope, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. She had not only hit an impossible target, she had killed two men with one shot from a distance that defied belief. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. The reality of what she had done, the sheer violent finality of it, crashed down on her. She lowered her rifle and slumped against the parapet, her body racked with a sudden violent exhaustion. She had achieved the impossible, and she felt nothing but a vast, empty cold. In the armory, the silence was absolute. Thomas Granger, a man who had spent his life around violence, and the men who dispense it, was utterly still. The story was over, but its echo seemed to vibrate in the air between them. He stared at Maya, this quiet woman with the steady hands, and tried to reconcile her with the impossible act she had just described. The math worked. The physics were borderline but plausible under perfect conditions. But the skill, the sheer audacity, it was the stuff of legend. He finally found his voice. 2,940 meters with an M2010, that's... He trailed off, shaking his head. That's not a shot. That's a miracle. Maya didn't preen. She didn't correct him. She just looked at him with those eyes that held too much memory. It was a choice, she said quietly. And it was a burden. Granger understood. He had carried his own burdens from Fallujah and Ramadi. The spotter, he asked. The one you saw first. Was he? Confirmed, Maya said. Later analysis of satellite imagery, comms intercepts, and reports from the village confirmed the kill. Two high-value ISIS operatives, a sniper and his spotter who had been responsible for dozens of civilian deaths. Her voice was flat, clinical. It was confirmed by multiple agencies, including some of yours. The shot went into the official record books, though my name was kept out of it. It's just a statistic now, another data point in the long-range shooting archives. Granger leaned forward, his respect for her immense. So why are you here? Why are you telling me this? For the first time, a flicker of something other than stoicism crossed Maya's face. Uncertainty. Because I can't stop, she admitted. After that day, the ranch in Montana felt too small. The quiet felt too loud. I tried to go back, to be that person again. But the person who made that shot, she's part of me now. I need to understand it. I need to understand what I'm capable of and what it means. She gestured around the armory. That's why I'm here. I've been talking to some of your instructors, observing the training, and I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for context. For a tribe that might understand the language I now speak. Granger looked at her for a long moment. He saw the isolation, the profound loneliness of being exceptional. He knew that tribe. He was a part of it. The course is tough, he said, a hint of the old instructor creeping into his voice. It breaks people. It breaks them down to nothing and builds them back up. You think you're ready for that? Maya picked up her rifle, cradling it in her arms. It was a gesture of familiarity, not of threat. Chief, she said, her voice regaining its quiet steel. After you've watched a bullet travel for 6 seconds and change the world, there's not much else that can break you. Granger smiled then, a rare, genuine expression. He stood up and offered his hand. She took it, by her grip firm and strong. "Well, Maya from Montana," he said. "Welcome to the fraternity. It's a hell of a club and the dues are a bitch, but I think you'll find we speak your language." He nodded towards the door leading out of the armory and into the wider world of the training facility. "The stalking phase starts Monday at 0500. Don't be late." As she walked away, the ghost of the 2,940-meter shot finally had a place to rest. Not as a rumor or a myth, but as the first chapter in a new story, one that was just beginning to be written in the classified armories and on the training ranges of the world's most elite warriors.